Imagine waking up one morning and realizing the stiffness in your hands, the ache in your knees, or that sharp twinge in your hips did not just happen overnight, but had been quietly building for years, meal by meal, bite by bite. What if arthritis is not only about aging or old injuries? What if certain everyday foods are silently turning up the inflammation inside your joints, while other foods could just as easily start turning it down? Today we are talking about the 7 foods that make arthritis dramatically worse, foods many people over 60 eat without realizing the hidden cost, and the foods that can actually help your joints feel lighter, calmer, and more mobile. If you have been searching for real answers, clarity, and a little hope, you are in the right place. Now, I know what you might be thinking. I have had arthritis for years. It is just part of getting older, right? And yes, wear and tear plays a role. Old sports injuries, decades of work, the natural aging process, they all contribute. But here is what most people do not realize. Arthritis is not just mechanical damage. It is not like a car tire wearing down from too many miles. It is a living, breathing, biological process happening inside your body right now, influenced by inflammation, your immune system, the health of your gut, and yes, what you eat. Let me explain. Your joints are not just bone rubbing against bone. Between those bones is something called cartilage, a smooth, cushiony tissue that lets everything glide easily when you move. And that cartilage is made up of specialized cells, little workers called chondrites. These cells are constantly trying to repair and maintain your cartilage, keeping your joints healthy and resilient. But when inflammation shows up, it is like throwing sand into a well-oiled machine. Those repair cells cannot do their job. The inflammation disrupts the signals, damages the tissues, and over time the cartilage breaks down faster than it can be rebuilt. So arthritis is not just something that happens to you, it is something your body is actively responding to every single day. And that means you have more control than you think. The surprising story of arthritis actually starts deep inside your cells in a place most of us have never heard of. Imagine for a moment that each of your cells is like a tiny factory, and inside that factory, there is a special assembly line dedicated to one job, folding proteins into the exact shapes your body needs to function. This assembly line is called the endoplasmic reticulum. Do not worry, you do not need to remember the name. Just think of it as the protein folding department. Now, when everything is running smoothly, this department hums along, building the proteins your joints need to stay strong and flexible. But when something goes wrong, when the factory gets stressed, things start to fall apart. Proteins do not fold correctly, signals get scrambled, and that stress triggers a cascade of inflammation that spreads through the joint like wildfire. Here is the fascinating part. Researchers studying arthritis found that this stress in the protein folding department happens before almost any other kind of damage. Even before your mitochondria, the powerhouses of your cells, start to struggle, this quiet stress is already setting the stage for inflammation and pain. Why does this matter? Because if we can reduce that stress, we can stop inflammation at its source. And it turns out certain foods and nutrients protect this delicate system, while others assault it relentlessly. But the real twist comes next, because those tiny factories do not work alone. They are deeply connected to something happening far away from your joints, something happening in your gut. You have probably heard about the gut-brain connection, how your digestive system influences your mood, your mental clarity, even your sleep. Well, there is also something called the gut-joint axis, and it is just as powerful. Here is how it works. Inside your intestines, you have trillions of bacteria, your microbiome. These are not invaders, they are partners. And one of their most important jobs is helping you create special compounds from bile. Now, bile is something your liver makes to help you digest fats. You have probably heard of the gallbladder storing bile, but what you might not know is that your gut bacteria take that bile and transform it into something called secondary bile salts. And these secondary bile salts are potent anti-inflammatory agents. They travel through your bloodstream, land in your joints, and act like firefighters, dousing inflammation before it can take hold. They also protect that protein folding department we talked about earlier, reducing the cellular stress that kicks off the whole inflammatory cascade. So when your microbiome is healthy and balanced, your joints get this steady stream of natural protection. But when your microbiome is damaged by antibiotics, processed foods, stress, or poor diet, those protective bile salts disappear, and suddenly your joints are left exposed, vulnerable, inflamed? This is why someone who has had their gallbladder removed or someone who has been on antibiotics for weeks often notices their joints start to ache more. It is not a coincidence. It is biology. And that brings us directly to the foods that disrupt this system the most. These are the foods that damage your microbiome, stress your cells, and flood your body with inflammatory signals. If you have arthritis, whether it is osteoarthritis in your knees, rheumatoid arthritis in your hands, or gout in your feet, these 7 foods are quietly making things worse. Let us start with the first one, emulsifiers. Now, emulsifiers are ingredients added to foods to make them creamy, smooth, and blended. You will find them in frozen desserts, creamy salad dressings, processed sauces, and even some protein bars. One of the most common is something called polyorbate 80. Sounds harmless, right? But here's what it does. It disrupts the protective mucus layer in your gut, allowing bacteria and inflammatory compounds to leak through the intestinal wall and into your bloodstream. Remember those beneficial gut bacteria that make anti-inflammatory bile salts? Emulsifiers throw their ecosystem into chaos. Studies have found a direct correlation between consuming these additives and increased joint inflammation. It is not dramatic. It is not immediate. But meal after meal, day after day, it adds up. The second food might surprise you, low-fat soy protein powder and plant-based protein isolates. Now, I am not saying all plant proteins are bad, but the highly processed industrialized versions, like soy protein, isolate, and many protein bars and shakes, come with problems. First, they are often stripped of fat, which means they do not stimulate bile production. Remember, bile is essential for making those anti-inflammatory compounds. Without fat in your diet, your gallbladder does not contract, bile does not flow, and your gut bacteria cannot do their job. Second, these proteins are missing something critical, taurine. Taurine is an amino acid found abundantly in animal foods, meat, fish, eggs. It is one of the primary building blocks your liver uses to make bile. If you are relying heavily on plant proteins and avoiding animal foods, you may not be getting enough taurine to support healthy bile production, and that over time can leave your joints more inflamed and less protected. There is also the issue of hexane, a chemical solvent sometimes used in processing soy protein. It is supposed to evaporate, but there is little oversight and residues may remain. Even in small amounts, these residues can add to the toxic load your liver has to process. And anything that stresses the liver indirectly stresses your joints. The third food is one we have talked about before, but it is worth repeating because it is everywhere. Refined seed oils. Now let me be clear, not all seed oils are the same. If you have a bottle of cold-pressed, minimally refined sunflower or safflower oil stored in a dark bottle and used gently, that is very different from what most people consume. What I am talking about are the oils used in restaurants, fast food, packaged snacks, and fried foods. Oils that have been refined, bleached, deodorized, and heated to temperatures over 500 degrees. When you heat these oils, especially repeatedly, they break down into toxic byproducts called aldehydes. These aldehydes are highly inflammatory. They damage your cells, including the delicate cells in your joints. They embed themselves into your cell membranes, making those membranes stiff and dysfunctional, and they interfere with your mitochondria, the energy centers of your cells, leaving you feeling more fatigued and achy. So yes, technically, some studies show that replacing saturated fats with certain seed oils can improve cholesterol markers, but those studies do not account for the real-world damage caused by reheated, overprocessed oils. And when it comes to arthritis, the evidence is clear. Refined heated seed oils are inflammatory troublemakers. The fourth food is alcohol, especially beer. Beer is particularly problematic because it is high in purines, compounds that break down into uric acid. If you have ever dealt with gout, you know that uric acid crystals in the joints are excruciatingly painful. But even if you do not have gout, alcohol stresses your liver, and as we have discussed, anything that harms the liver disrupts bile production, weakens your microbiome, and ultimately increases inflammation in your joints. Wine and hard liquor are not off the hook either. They may not have the same purine load, but they still tax your liver and interfere with nutrient absorption. Moderation is key, and for many people with arthritis, Cutting back significantly or eliminating alcohol altogether brings noticeable relief. The fifth food is casein A, one protein found in conventional dairy products. Now, not all dairy is the same. Casein A2 found in goat's milk, sheep milk, and some specialty cow's milk is easier to digest and less inflammatory. But the casein A1 found in most commercial milk, especially when it is concentrated into things like processed cheese, protein powders, or additives like sodium caseinate and calcium caseinate, can trigger immune reactions and joint flare-ups. You will find these concentrated casein proteins in protein bars, meal replacement shakes, and even infant formula. They are cheap, they are shelf-stable, and they are everywhere. But for someone with arthritis, they can be a hidden source of ongoing inflammation. If you love dairy, consider switching to A2 milk, or better yet, choose grass-fed cheese from goats or sheep. The difference in how your body responds can be remarkable. The sixth food is modern wheat. I know wheat gets blamed for a lot, but here is why it is particularly troublesome for arthritis. First, the carbohydrate in refined wheat called amylopectin A spikes your blood sugar higher and faster than table sugar. That blood sugar spike triggers inflammatory pathways throughout your body, including your joints. Second, wheat contains gluten, a protein that many people struggle to fully digest. The byproducts of incomplete gluten digestion can have an opioid-like effect, initially numbing discomfort, but eventually leading to delayed pain and inflammation. Third, there is something called wheat germagluten, a compound almost as inflammatory as gluten itself. It binds to the lining of your gut and can contribute to leaky gut, allowing inflammatory particles into your bloodstream. And finally, most conventional wheat is sprayed with glyphosate, a herbicide, as a drying agent right before harvest. Even though most wheat is not genetically modified, this chemical exposure is significant. And glyphosate does not just wash off, it gets absorbed into the grain. Research shows it disrupts your microbiome, killing off beneficial bacteria and allowing inflammatory species to flourish. For someone with arthritis, that microbial imbalance translates directly into more joint pain. So when we talk about wheat being inflammatory, we are not talking about one single issue. It is a perfect storm of blood sugar spikes, difficult to digest proteins, gut-damaging compounds, and chemical residues all working together to keep inflammation high. And that brings us to the seventh food, high fructose corn syrup. Now, you might think it is just sugar, but high fructose corn syrup is different. It is a highly processed industrial sweetener that is unusually high in fructose. And here's the problem. Fructose is metabolized almost entirely in your liver. When you consume large amounts, your liver becomes overwhelmed. It starts producing fat, developing insulin resistance, and triggering inflammatory pathways that radiate throughout your entire body, including your joints. What makes it even more insidious is that there is no natural off switch. With regular food, your body signals when you have had enough. But with high fructose corn syrup, those signals do not work properly. People can drink soda after soda, consuming far more fructose than their liver can safely handle without ever feeling satisfied. The result is chronic liver inflammation, insulin resistance, metabolic dysfunction, and persistent grinding joint pain that seems to come from nowhere. So now that we know what is aggravating your joints, let us talk about what can nourish them. Because here is the beautiful truth. Just as certain foods fuel inflammation, other foods actively calm it, support your microbiome, protect those cellular factories, and give your body what it needs to heal. The first category is fermented foods. Think sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, Bulgarian yogurt, traditionally fermented pickles. These foods are alive with beneficial bacteria, the exact species that help produce those anti-inflammatory bile salts we talked about earlier. When you eat fermented foods regularly, you are directly feeding and strengthening the gut-joint axis. You are giving your microbiome the support it needs to protect your joints from the inside out. And you do not need much. A few forkfuls of sauerkraut with your meal, a small glass of kefir in the morning. These simple additions can make a profound difference over time. The second category is healthy fats. Extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, fatty fish like salmon and mackerel, and grass-fed butter and cheese. These fats do several important things. First, they stimulate bile production and gallbladder contraction, which sets the stage for your gut bacteria to create those protective bile compounds. Second, They provide the building blocks for anti-inflammatory molecules your body uses to calm irritated tissues. And third, they support the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D and K2 that are absolutely critical for joint health. Do not be afraid of fat. The low-fat era did us no favors, especially when it comes to arthritis. Your joints need fat to heal. The third category is foods rich in vitamin D. Fatty fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, and cod liver oil are some of the best sources. Vitamin D is one of the most powerful anti-inflammatory compounds in your body, especially when it comes to joints. If you are deficient, and many people over 65 are, your inflammatory signals go sky high. Now, you can get vitamin D from sunshine, and that is wonderful. But for most people, especially in the winter months, food and supplements become essential. And here is the key. If you have arthritis, you may need more than the standard recommended dose. We are talking therapeutic levels, perhaps 60, 70, even 80 international units per day, depending on your situation. At those levels, vitamin D starts working like medicine, calming immune overreactions, reducing pain, and helping your joints feel lighter and more mobile. Of course, if you are taking higher doses, you will want to work with a knowledgeable healthcare provider and also take vitamin K2, magnesium, and zinc to make sure everything stays balanced. But the impact can be truly life-changing, which brings us to omega-3 fatty acids. These are found abundantly in fatty fish and fish oil supplements. Omega-3 seconds are nature's fire extinguishers for inflammation. They reduce inflammatory signaling molecules, support healthy cell membranes, and protect the delicate tissues in your joints. If you are not eating fish regularly, a high-quality fish oil or cod liver oil supplement can be incredibly helpful. Then there are sulfur-rich foods, onions, garlic, and cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts. Sulfur is a mineral your joints absolutely love. It is involved in building and repairing cartilage, and it supports the detoxification processes that keep inflammation in check. These vegetables might not seem glamorous, but they are quiet workhorses for joint health. And finally, collagen-rich foods. Your cartilage is made largely of collagen, so it makes sense that getting more collagen in your diet supports joint repair. Bone broth is one of the best sources. Simmered for hours, it pulls collagen and other healing compounds out of the bones and into a nourishing, easy-to-digest liquid. You can also take collagen supplements, which many people find helpful. Here is an interesting point. If you are just eating regular cuts of meat, steaks, chicken breasts, ground beef, you are only getting a small percentage of collagen, maybe 3 to 5%, but your body needs closer to 30% of its protein intake to come from collagen to properly support your joints. That is a big gap. So unless you are regularly eating tougher cuts of meat, cartilage, skin, or bone broth, you are probably not getting enough. Now, food is essential, but there are a few key nutrients that deserve special attention because they work synergistically to protect your joints in ways food alone sometimes cannot fully accomplish. Let us talk about vitamin K2. You have probably heard of vitamin K1, which is involved in blood clotting. Vitamin K2 does something different. It directs calcium to where it belongs, your bones and teeth, and keeps it out of where it does not belong, your soft tissues, including your joints and arteries. If you are deficient in K2, calcium can start depositing in your joints, contributing to stiffness, pain, and even bone spurs. Grass-fed butter, certain cheeses, and fermented foods like natto are good sources. And if you are taking higher doses of vitamin D, you absolutely need to pair it with K2 to prevent calcium from ending up in the wrong places. Magnesium is another critical nutrient. It works alongside vitamin D and K2, supporting hundreds of biochemical reactions in your body, including those that regulate inflammation and cellular stress. Many older adults are low in magnesium, and that deficiency can make arthritis symptoms worse. And then there is iron, but here the advice is different. You want to keep your iron levels moderate, not high. Too much iron in your body fuels inflammation and oxidative stress, especially in your joints. If you are a man or a woman who has gone through menopause, you are not losing iron through menstruation anymore, so it can build up over time. Cooking with iron skillets, taking iron supplements unnecessarily, these habits can backfire. It is worth getting your iron levels checked, and if they are high, working with your doctor to bring them down through blood donation or dietary changes. Now, it is important to understand that not all arthritis is the same, and different types respond to slightly different strategies. Osteoarthritis is the most common type. It is driven by a combination of mechanical wear, inflammation, and metabolic factors. The cartilage breaks down faster than it is rebuilt, and over time, bones start rubbing together, causing pain and stiffness. For osteoarthritis, everything we have talked about, anti-inflammatory foods, healthy fats, collagen, vitamin D, applies beautifully. Rheumatoid arthritis is different. It is an autoimmune disease, meaning your immune system is mistakenly attacking your own joints. The inflammation is more intense, more systemic, and it requires a stronger nutritional response. For rheumatoid arthritis, high-dose vitamin D becomes especially important because it helps regulate immune function, calming the overactive immune response that is damaging your joints. Omega-3 seconds, fermented foods, and eliminating inflammatory triggers like gluten and processed dairy can also make a dramatic difference. Gout is another distinct type driven by high uric acid levels that form painful crystals in the joints. For gout, avoiding alcohol, especially beer, and reducing purine-rich foods is essential. But supporting liver function, reducing sugar and fructose, and staying well hydrated also play critical roles. The point is, understanding which type of arthritis you are dealing with helps you tailor your approach for maximum relief. Here is something most people never consider: the connection between your mouth and your joints. Researchers have found that chronic infections in the gums, especially lingering infections from old root canals or periodontal disease, can leak bacteria into your bloodstream. These bacteria travel through your lymphatic system and can settle in your joints and arteries, creating persistent low-grade inflammation that is nearly impossible to trace back to its source. There is even evidence that some of these oral bacteria form biofilms in the joints, protective shells that shield them from your immune system. They sit there hidden, quietly fueling inflammation year after year. If you have unexplained, stubborn arthritis that does not respond well to diet and lifestyle changes, it might be worth seeing a biological dentist to check for hidden oral infections. Addressing the root cause can sometimes bring relief where nothing else has worked. So, how does someone put all this into action simply and realistically? It does not have to be complicated. Start by making a few easy swaps. Instead of conventional cheese, try goat or sheep cheese. Instead of grabbing a processed snack, have a small serving of sauerkraut or kimchi with your meal. Instead of cooking with refined seed oils, use olive oil or avocado oil. Instead of sugary drinks, enjoy mineral water, herbal tea, or water with a splash of lemon. Build your meals around healthy fats, moderate protein, including some collagen-rich sources like bone broth and plenty of colorful sulfur-rich vegetables. Add fermented foods daily, get sunlight when you can, and consider a vitamin D supplement, especially in winter. Pair it with K2 and magnesium. Keep it simple. Consistency matters more than perfection. A small shift repeated daily compounds into profound healing over weeks and months. Here is the core message I want you to take away. Arthritis is not just about aging. It is not inevitable, and it is not something you are powerless against. It is deeply shaped by food, microbiome health, cellular stress, and the nutrients you give your body. And that means small, intentional choices, meal by meal, day by day, can quietly reduce inflammation, protect your joints, and help you move more freely and comfortably than you have in years. You do not have to accept pain as your new normal. You have more control than you think. And the body you have today is still capable of healing, still capable of responding to the care and nourishment you give it. If this breakdown helped you understand why certain foods worsen arthritis and what to eat instead, make sure you like this video so others can find it too. And if you want more easy science-based guidance like this, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me which food surprised you the most today. Your story could help someone else finally get relief. Take care of yourself, your joints, and your future self will thank you.